Call the meeting to order, please. We're very fortunate and appreciative to have John Drunnen, Fellowship Bible Church, to deliver our invocation. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Please join me in prayer. O Lord our God, creator of this world, we come before you this evening asking that you would lead and guide the discussions before the Board of Supervisors this evening. We know that all authority is ordained by you and that we are called to respect that authority. I thank you for the men and women of this board and the sacrifice of their time and talents to provide leadership to our community. I thank you for their families and the sacrifices they make along with them. I pray, Lord, that you would bless them as they lead us as a community. God, you tell us in the book of James that we can ask you in faith for wisdom, and you will give it generously to all who ask. Tonight, I pray that the Lord, that you would provide this wisdom to the members of the board. I pray that you would provide clarity and discernment in the board's questions, discussions, and decisions. I thank you for the workers in our county that serve and protect us daily, including members of law enforcement, fire and rescue, social services, and so many more. Lord, I think of the schools in our county that are holding their first day of school tomorrow. Pray that you provide administrators with clarity in leading the schools, teachers with patience as they begin their lessons, bus drivers with alertness on the road, students with a passion for learning, and a covering of safety for all of them as they begin this new school year. You are indeed a God of love and mercy. We thank you for loving us so much that you sent your Son, Jesus, to die on the cross, that whoever would believe in him would have everlasting life. I humbly ask you, Father, that you would continue to bless this wonderful community that you've called us to. We pray this all in Jesus' holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, sir. Vice Chairman Lofton, will you lead us in the pledge, please?
Stand, face the flag, and join me in our pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Adoption of the agenda. Are there any proposed changes?
Mr. Chairman, I would just point out that we have added a item 6O under the consent agenda, which is a letter of support for a grant for the Timbrook Achievement Center. We received a request from Judge Kellis to provide a letter of support for that grant.
Yes. All right. How would the board like to handle?
Mr. Chairman, I move to adopt the consent agenda as amended and presented.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Anyone? Supervisor McCarthy?
Aye.
Supervisor Slaughter?
Aye.
Supervisor Wells?
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton?
Aye.
Supervisor Dunn?
Aye.
Supervisor Trout?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and the motion carries. All right. Bring us to citizen comments. Anyone sign up? Ms. Phillips?
Steve Jennings.
Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Jennings, and I live in Back Creek. I stand before you tonight in regards to item 6 on the consent calendar. I wish to commend the grant applications to the staff, to the state of Virginia for our first broadband project. It is an important first step in establishing our community to receive broadband services. As a teacher for over 26 years at Sharando High School, I have daily contact with students who have difficulty completing homework assignments for the lack of reliable internet services at home. The long-suffering parents of these students may need to drive them to Winchester or to the Hanley Library on work and school nights. You know, there isn't even a McDonald's near the Back Creek dead zone. It is a sad fact of life that if we live in Frederick County, not all of our students have equal opportunity when it comes to homework. I understand the logistical reasons in the new partnership for selecting Apple Pie Ridge as the neighborhood for the debut of this service. I'm sure that our staff at Sharando will learn much. However, the fact remains that it is a reasonably affluent neighborhood. It is not in Back Creek, a district which is traditionally overlooked for services, and I intend to help in that. I'm asking for you tonight to implement before the year is over a statement of intention to locate a second project, should there be one, in the mountain in Back Creek. That should not be a difficult thing to do because our current Back Creek supervisor is the chairman of that committee. If any or all of Sartannery, Mountain Falls, and Shawnee Land are earmarked for a 2020 grant, it would take our students until 2022 to use that. So therefore, seniors, freshmen that are moving into Sharando this year would not be able to use broadband in their area until they're seniors. I am aware, and I trust you are too, that such a project would also interface with the resolved dead zones in the mountains for fire and sheriff radios and save the community millions of dollars in the long run. Many other important actions need to be implemented by the county to align itself as a welcome environment for this badly needed service. I will follow those with interest and support.
Thank you, sir.
Robin Young.
Good evening. My name is Robin Young, and I live in Back Creek. It falls to me to follow up on three things. The first is the critically important Dig Once ordinance, which many cities around the nation and in Virginia have adopted, but Frederick County has not. The objective of Dig Once is to have all major infrastructure programs install an underground conduit for fiber link when building or renovating roads, railways, pipes, utility lines, utility infrastructure, and energy distribution channels. Also known as Share the Trench, it is often applied to residential developments, strip malls, freestanding businesses, medical office buildings, malls, anything that breaks ground. When it breaks ground, it cuts trenches to put in water and sewer, and sometimes landlines for phones. While the trench is open, conduit goes in so that fiber optic cable has a welcome pathway in the future at a fraction of the cost of digging for it separately. Frederick County needs to move on this and organize the cities contiguous to it right now. In Middletown, they're building a whole new tract of houses, Dan Ryan houses. They've dug the trenches. There's no conduit going in. It's a missed opportunity. It's tragic. The occupants may be denied cost-effective internet access. We really need to have contiguous cable pathways throughout Frederick County as we can build them. We need to get started ASAP. And speaking of tragedies, think of the problem that Snowden Bridge presents. Already proffered, already approved, all that ground waiting to be broken, and no conduit scheduled to go in. Zero requirements for it to go in. It's frankly a mess. As someone who cut her political teeth during proffer hell for a year and a half with Carmouze, I cannot urge you strongly enough to caucus with your attorney and find a way, not a way to fail, but find a way to get conduit under those roads in Snowden Bridge and Jordan Springs Elementary. I urge you to be bold, to break new ground, to push the limits, but have those conversations. There is one additional conversation I would urge you to have. Again, it is out of the box, but it would cost little and truly serve an underserved population in Back Creek. You heard Dr. Jennings say that even if you take a stand to put the people up on the mountain into second place in the next grant, it will be 3 more years till they can plug into broadband. Why not begin a multi-departmental conversation to see if a modest homework center could be opened up on the mountain as a pilot program? My suggestion is 4 nights a week, from 5 to 7, Monday to Thursday. You bring together the library, the school district, see if they can find a little money for 8 to 10 hours of salary a week to proctor that center. You have the IT department bring in cable. Maybe you use a corner of the community room at the North Mountain Fire Station. Offer it as a pilot. It's an economically depressed area. The kids could benefit from this. Please have the conversation and see where it goes. If it doesn't work, you can pull the plug. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
D.T. Bayless.
Hello, my name is D.T. Bayless. I live
Ms.
in...
Bayless.
Yes, yes, that would be nice.
There you go.
That helps, how's that?
Much better.
Okay, my name is D.T. Bayless. I live in Back Creek off of Windsor Lane, off Cedar Creek Grade. I have wonderful internet because I have Comcast. I'm here just to reiterate what you've heard already, the need in Back Creek to have affordable broadband. I first want to congratulate you for working so hard and securing funding for Apple Pie Ridge area and finding a partner to put in affordable broadband. I think that's a wonderful thing. I was so thrilled when I saw that in the Winchester Star. So congratulations to every one of you for working for that and doing it. I just hope that your endeavors will continue so that we can get Back Creek and other areas of Frederick County also with affordable broadband. I understand the difficulty in finding providers to work with. I know that, but I'm really hopeful that if you hear from people like me, that you will work very hard to try to secure it for Back Creek and other areas. And lastly, after hearing Robin Young talk about dig once, I haven't heard of this before, but it certainly does sound like it makes an awful lot of sense, that if you can put in some type of conduit and other people can use it, like in the past years, 30, 40 years ago when they were hanging cable on telephone poles, and that was an easy way to do it to save the cable companies money. If that could be done, that's a great idea. Hopefully you all will look into that. But again, thank you for what you've done. Please continue to work for Back Creek because it really needs help. Really appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right. Will bring us Board of Supervisors comments. Are there any?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
McCarthy.
To follow up on the 3 comments that were just made before the board and the public comments of the 3 citizens regarding broadband access, Supervisor Lofton and myself in Gainsborough and Back Creek recognized that there was an issue serving our citizens, especially being underserved, with access to broadband late last year, and began working on a revised ordinance with our county attorney to expand access to broadband on a number of different levels, whether it be the fiber optics, whether it be wireless. We're working on some projects at this point. So I think at least the 2 of us understand the difficulty that our 2 districts are faced with in not having access, easy access, or reliable access to broadband, and we are in the process of working on it, and I appreciate the 3 citizens who came forward today to speak to that, because it is something that's very much needed in our districts, and I thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? All right. Vice Chairman, you join me. Mr. Baker, would you join us up front, please, sir?
What's that?
Yes. Here. Yeah,
Or citizen comment.
you did it. Wipe this outside a little bit. You're right. It's important. You voted? It's a good vote. We're just testing to see if I can remember.
That's it.
Okay. Whereas Anthony C. Baker, who serves as a marketing manager, is it on? Yes. Whereas Anthony C. Baker, who serves as a marketing manager with the Frederick County Parks and Recreation Department, was nominated for Employee of the Month. And whereas in May of 2019, Anthony C. Baker was asked to assist in finding a method to circulate information to staff that would inform them of upcoming programs and provide commission meetings and park project updates. And whereas Anthony C. Baker created a fantastic newsletter that's circulated among staff by constant contact and is innovative, informative, and helps bridge the gap of communication among the various work locations. And whereas Anthony C. Baker's newsletter project was a very professional, communicative piece that helps all areas of Parks and Recreation Department be more informed about what is happening in each of the department's divisions. For in the absence of face-to-face contact with each staff member on a daily basis, creating a method of communication will help continue to build a team atmosphere that is vital to the success of any department. Now therefore be it resolved by the Frederick County Board of Supervisors this 14th day of August 2019 that Anthony C. Baker is hereby recognized as the Frederick County Employee of the Month for July 2019. And be it further resolved that the Board of Supervisors extends gratitude to Anthony C. Baker for his outstanding performance, dedicated service, and wishes him continued success in future endeavors. And be it finally resolved that Anthony C. Baker is hereby entitled to all the rights and privileges associated with this award. Please join me in thanking and congratulating Mr. Baker for a job well done. Taylor, would you like to join us? Welcome, thank you.
Shut up.
You know where the camera is? There are two of them. Here we go. All right, Rachel E. Taylor. Whereas Rachel E. Taylor, Family Services Specialist 4 with the Frederick County Department of Social Services, was nominated for Employee of the Month. And whereas Rachel Taylor, who is assigned to the Child Protective Services Unit, is always willing to lend support, expertise, knowledge, and guidance to those who are new to the unit. And whereas Rachel exhibits her commitment and takes the time to train, advise, and assist with any and all questions regarding cases, procedure, and best practices that are asked of her, she works patiently in a very stressful but critical role and is always willing to listen and assist. And whereas Rachel works on call the majority of the month as backup for other social workers and never hesitates to go out on a call with a colleague to ensure they are able to assess the safety of the families involved. And whereas Rachel Taylor does exceptional work and is a model social worker, despite the enormous caseload and paperwork, and makes time to ensure that the families and children of Frederick County are safe and able to receive the services they need to succeed. Now therefore be it resolved by the Frederick County Board of Supervisors this 14th day of August 2019 that Rachel Taylor is hereby recognized as the Frederick County Employee of the Month for August of 2019. And be it further resolved that the Board of Supervisors extends gratitude to Rachel Taylor for her outstanding performance and dedicated service and wishes her continued success in future endeavors. And be it finally resolved that Rachel Taylor is hereby entitled to all of the rights and privileges associated with this award. Please join me in thanking and congratulating Ms. Taylor for an outstanding job. All right, now we're going to adopt the amended consent agenda. Or the, yeah,
Mr. Chairman,
yes, sir.
Is that right? Did we adopt the consent? Do we need to go back and adopt the formal agenda, or which have we done?
Probably clarify and do both. I mean, I think when you adopted the agenda, you actually slipped in the word consent, so technically, I suppose the consent agenda is adopted and we want to do the
Yeah, I think I
agenda.
misspoke and said consent when I didn't mean to do that.
Are we good, or you want the agenda?
I think for the sake of clarity, we ought to adopt
Thank you,
the
sir.
agenda.
The agenda.
So move.
Second.
Motion to adopt the agenda is presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The agenda is adopted as presented. So I'll put it back up. County officials, committee appointments, Shawnee Land Sanitary District.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you. As you know, the members of the Shawnee Land community get the opportunity to serve on the District Advisory Committee, and we've been very fortunate to have some good people serve on that committee. From time to time, we do have people who would wish to serve on a committee, and so I think it's only appropriate to give other people a chance to serve on a committee, to have them present new ideas and new focus on how the district committee could advise the operations manager in making things better in Shawnee Land. So with that being said, I would like to, you consider the application to appoint Mr. Jason Crosdale to the Shawnee Land Sanitary District Advisory Committee.
Heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. He is appointed. Bring us to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Kevin Scott's five-year term is expiring. He is eligible and willing. How would the board like to handle this one?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I'd like to reappoint Kevin Scott to the Board of Zoning Appeals. He is willing to serve.
thank you. You've heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second, Mr.
And
Chairman.
a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Mr. Scott is reappointed for another five-year term. Conservation Easement Authority, we have two individuals whose terms expire both August and September.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we reappoint Mr. Todd Lodge and Mr. John Marker.
Heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Mr. Lodge and Mr. Marker are both reappointed for additional three-year terms. Frederick Winchester Service Authority, we would like to appoint Eric Lawrence to that body. How would the board like to handle that?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we consider the application and appoint Eric Lawrence to the Frederick Winchester Service Authority.
You've heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Mr. Lawrence is appointed to the Frederick Winchester Service Authority. All right, that'll bring us to committee business, the Finance Committee. Supervisor Slaughter.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. The Finance Committee met in July, and items number 2, 4, 6, and 8 were considered under consent agenda, and I would so move.
Second.
Heard the motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Supervisor Trout?
Aye.
Supervisor Dunn?
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton?
Aye.
Supervisor Wells? Supervisor Slaughter?
Aye.
Supervisor McCarthy?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and the motion carries.
Item number 1, the Winchester Regional Airport Executive Director requests a fiscal year 20 Airport Capital Fund supplemental appropriation in the amount of $2.635,000 and an FY20 General Fund supplemental appropriation in the amount of $409,164. These amounts represent the FY20 airport capital budget and the county share of the local revenue needed. The committee recommends approval, and I would so move.
Heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, any discussion? Supervisor McCarthy?
Aye.
Supervisor Slaughter?
Aye.
Supervisor Wells?
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton?
Aye.
Supervisor Dunn?
Aye.
Supervisor Trout?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and the motion carries.
Item number 3, the sheriff request of fiscal year 19 and FY20 general fund supplemental appropriation in the amount of $40,020.68. This amount represents insurance proceeds received in fiscal year 19 for a weather-damaged tent system used for vehicle storage, and the carry forward of the funds to the new year to purchase a replacement. The committee recommends approval, and I would so move.
Heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Is there any discussion? Supervisor Trout?
Aye.
Supervisor Dunn? Aye. Supervisor Lofton?
Aye.
Supervisor Wells?
Aye.
Supervisor Slaughter?
Aye.
Supervisor McCarthy?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and the motion carries.
Item number 5, the Northwestern Regional Adult Detention Center Superintendent requests a fiscal year 20 NRADC Fund supplemental appropriation in the amount of $66,021.20. This amount represents a carry forward of unspent fiscal year 19 funds for the replacement of an underground storage tank. This project is currently in process and falls under a standing purchase order. The committee recommends approval, and I would so move.
Heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And the second. Is there any discussion? Supervisor McCarthy?
Aye.
Supervisor Slaughter?
Aye.
Supervisor Wells?
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton?
Aye.
Supervisor Dunn?
Aye.
Supervisor Trout?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and the motion carries.
Item number 7, the Commonwealth Attorney request of fiscal year 20 general fund supplemental appropriation in the amount of $19,895. This amount represents 10 months of fringes needed to convert a part-time administrative investigator to full-time. Local funds are required. The HR committee approved the full-time position at their July 12, 2019 meeting. The committee recommends approval, and I would so move.
Heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And the second. Is there any discussion? Supervisor Trout?
Aye.
Supervisor Dunn?
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton?
Aye.
Supervisor Wells?
Aye.
Supervisor Slaughter?
Aye.
Supervisor McCarthy?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and the motion carries.
Item number 9, the Parks and Recreation Director requests a fiscal year 20 general fund supplemental appropriation in the amount of $8,500. This amount represents proffer funds to be used to provide a 4-seat swing set addition to the existing Rose Hill Park playground. The committee recommends approval, and I would so move.
Heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And the second. Is there any discussion? Supervisor McCarthy?
Aye.
Supervisor Slaughter?
Aye.
Supervisor Wells?
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton?
Aye.
Supervisor Dunn?
Aye.
Supervisor Trout?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and the motion carries.
The last item, item number 10, the Parks and Recreation Director request of fiscal year 20 general fund supplemental appropriation in the amount of $7,000. This amount represents proffer funds to be used for a pickleball court at Frederick Heights Park. No local funds required. The committee recommended approval, and I would so move.
Heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Is there any discussion? Supervisor Trout?
Aye.
Supervisor Dunn?
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton?
Aye.
Supervisor Wells?
Aye.
Supervisor Slaughter?
Aye.
Supervisor McCarthy?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and the motion carries.
That concludes my report, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, that will bring us to a public hearing, outdoor festival permit request of Robert L. Clark.
Mr. Chairman, this is a request for an outdoor festival permit to be held Saturday, August 31st from 5 to 9 p.m. on the grounds of 652 Buckton Road in Middletown, Virginia, also known as Thorndale Farm. And I believe Mr. Clark is here to answer questions if the board has them.
Questions of staff, anyone? Questions of Mr. Clark, anyone? Anything you'd like to add, sir?
No, sir.
Thank you very much. All right, this is a public hearing. Would anyone like to comment concerning this proposed conditional or outdoor festival permit? Anyone at all? Seeing no one, how would the board like to handle this one?
Mr. Chairman, this is in the Peckham Magisterial District, so I would like to recommend approval of outdoor festival permit request of Robert L. Clark as presented.
Heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Supervisor Trout?
Aye.
Supervisor Dunn?
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton?
Aye.
Supervisor Wells?
Aye.
Supervisor Slaughter?
Aye.
Supervisor McCarthy?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries, and your permit is approved, sir. Thank you very much.
very much.
Good luck. Outdoor Festival permit request to the Rotary Club of Winchester for the 44th Annual Shenandoah Valley Apple Harvest Festival.
Mr. Chairman, this permit is for the festival to be held Saturday, September 21st and Sunday, the 22nd, at the hours of 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. on the grounds of the fair in Stonewall Magisterial District. I'm not sure whether there's a fair representative here or not, but we've done this many times.
Yes. All right.
44 times.
So would anyone like to comment concerning the proposed festival permit for the annual fish fry? Anyone at all? Last call. How would the board like to handle this one?
Mr. Chairman, this is in the Stonewall Magisterial District. I would recommend approval for outdoor festival permit request of the Rotary Club of Winchester for the 44th Annual Shenandoah Valley Apple Harvest Festival.
Heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Is there any discussion? Supervisor McCarthy?
Aye.
Supervisor Slaughter?
Aye.
Supervisor Wells?
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton?
Aye.
Supervisor Dunn? Supervisor Trout?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries, and it is approved. And what brings us to a relocation or a change by agreement or boundary line between Frederick County and Warren County.
I'll take that one, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
This is, I think, the third time that this item has been before the board, but tonight is before the board in the form of a public hearing. This is a request to adjust the boundary line between Warren and Frederick County in the Foster Hollow Road area. The map to my left here shows the existing boundary of Frederick County. As you can see, it's a straight line from Route 522 over to about Cedar Creek. The area in dispute, or the area in question, is highlighted in red. Those properties we discovered through an exercise by the State Board of Elections where they were encouraging registrars to determine if folks were voting in their proper precinct. We discovered that there were about 9 properties there that, while physically located in Frederick County, the deeds all make reference to Warren County. The deeds that we have found went back as far as probably the 1940s. For whatever reason, there was no reference on some of the plats to the county line, and in some of the descriptions that make reference to the properties being located in Warren County. There, I believe, was one property that said it may be located in the Opequon district of Frederick County. To my left, you can see the bottom portion shows map data from the Warren County GIS Department, and you can see that those parcels have been subdivided. The map to the right is from the Frederick County GIS Department, and it shows the parcels in question as being one large parent tract. And again, this is Frederick County GIS data, again showing that those parcels don't, while physically located in Frederick County, don't exist in record in Frederick County. So as stated previously, this arose from concerns from the State Board of Elections. Frederick County, in consultation with Warren County, hired Marsh and Legg land surveyors to complete a survey of the area. And so that survey was completed, and you can see the dashed line that runs diagonally through the map. That is the surveyed line for Frederick and Warren County. And I believe Mr. Marsh said that the accuracy of that particular line is within 1 centimeter. As stated previously, a lot of this was due to incomplete deeds. This particular plat, you can see on the aerial, the red line's the county line. It runs through sort of the southeastern corner of the property, but the plat, there's no reference on the plat to the Warren-Frederick line. Same way with this plat from 1948. It's designated in the Cedarville district of Warren County, but indicates that a portion may be located in the Opequon district, but again, does not provide a boundary notation. In February, a meeting was held with representatives from Frederick County and Warren County and the affected property owners to make them aware of the boundary issue and to kind of talk about what that meant for them. That meeting, there were a lot of folks that have very strong emotional ties to Warren County because for their entire life they have grown up, in their minds, grown up in Warren County. They've been a part of the Warren County community, and then they find out that their properties are actually in Frederick County. So as you can imagine, there was some emotion with that issue and within that discussion. So as a result of that discussion and at that meeting, Mr. Marsh came up with a proposal that would relocate the county line. It would follow the existing line, and then you'd see it would veer off and follow sort of the straight property line of the parent tract over to Foster Hollow Road, and then down Foster Hollow Road, and then come back to the existing county line. You will notice at the very bottom of the screen, if I can, there's reference to an existing dwelling in Frederick County. The individuals at this residence, they were affected by the initial, I guess, boundary change. Our voter registrar, and looking at our GIS data, the GIS data showed the Frederick Warren line north of their house, and it showed their house being physically located in Warren County, even though for 40-plus years or more, they've been residents of Frederick County. So when Mr. Marsh surveyed the property line, we found that the majority of their dwelling is located within Frederick County, but there is a portion of the line that runs through sort of southeastern corner of the property. So Mr. Marsh's thought was to kind of clean that exercise up as well, so there would be no question where these folks resided. So he bumped the line a little bit to the south, so there would be about 0.9 acres of that property coming into Frederick County, but it would move their house fully into Frederick County, which is where they would like to be and remain. So the map now, the blue line shows what the proposed new county line would be if the board were agreeable to such a change. Again, it would follow the property line of the properties that are in question. There is one parcel, let's see if I can highlight it for you. That one parcel is the only parcel that was identified as being in Frederick County that is deeded and located in Frederick County. Those individuals did attend the community meeting in Warren County, and as we were discussing proposals to possibly relocate the boundary line, those folks had purchased the property, I believe, back in October. So they were agreeable to becoming part of Warren County if that made the boundary cleaner and sort of solve the problem for the other residents. So that's why the proposed line would follow the parent tract, take in the one property from Frederick County, follow Foster Hollow Road down to the existing county line, bump south to bring the house fully into Frederick County, and then follow the existing county line. So tonight, Mr. Chairman, this is a public hearing to receive comment on a proposal to relocate the county line. At the conclusion of the public hearing, staff would be seeking an action from the board on a proposed 2019 Warren County, Frederick County Boundary Adjustment Agreement. There is also a public hearing that will be held in Warren County by their board on August the 20th. At the conclusion of that public hearing, their staff would be seeking Warren County to do a similar action to approve a 2019 Warren County, Frederick County Boundary Adjustment Agreement. Once that agreement is adopted, should the board choose to, both boards choose to do so, it will be, order will be filed with the circuit clerk in Warren County, and then an order will be entered into the record, and the Secretary of the Commonwealth would be notified of the boundary adjustment, and then that would conclude the process. I would note that Mr. Scott Marsh with Marsh & Legg is here if there are any questions regarding the survey, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions the board may have.
Questions of Mr. Tibbs, anyone? All right. This is a public hearing. Would anyone like to comment concerning this proposed boundary line adjustment? Anyone at all? If we could have your name, magisterial district, and limit your comments to 3 minutes or less, please, sir.
My name's Carol Halls, and I'm one of the properties on Foster Hollow Road, and I spoke with you guys the last time I was in, and I just want to reiterate some of my concerns. Like I said, I was born and raised in Warren County, went to Warren County schools. I work in Warren County, did most of my business. I vote in Warren County, most of the council members in Warren County, the superintendent of schools, and I've lived there my whole life. And my grandfather and my brother and my cousins all here too, and that one property was subdivided, like they said, and they've all been in Warren County as well. And it affects our lives in so many ways. I know it's not going to affect you guys, as far as your life, but it's going to affect us. We're going to have to change. You got certain things you want to do. I don't know any of you supervisors. I know Bob Wells. I met him at Warren County meeting, but other than that, I don't know any of you guys. And it's just comforting to me to know that the people I vote for, I know who they are. And I've lived there my whole life. I built a house out there 32 years ago. My grandfather did it in 1934 or 40, somewhere around there. Anyway, but we have routines. We know where the dumpsters are. We know where the dump is. We know where the fire and rescue department, Fire Company 10. When my mother's house caught fire, it was the first fire department there. They was there within 10 minutes. It's meant a lot. And then, of course, if it could have been a life saved, it could have been a lot of different things. There's a lot of other issues concerning this zoning, and I'd like to reiterate that I really would like to stay in Warren County, and like I said, I know it's not going to affect you guys, but it's going to affect a lot of other people, so I appreciate you taking the time and thought to this action, and I appreciate all you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Would anyone else like to comment?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Christian Sr. This concerns the proposed agreement for relocation of the boundary line between Frederick and Warren counties. I built my home in 1972, and contrary to what there was a sign on Foster Hollow Road as you come in off the hardtop that said entering Warren County, leaving Frederick. And then you go on for another approximately quarter of a mile before you come to my home. Came a time when I wanted to build a home, and I had an aerial survey that showed me that that boundary line was not at that sign, but it went right through my property. So it was time to build a home, and the builder, we measured off 100. Well, first of all, I got Mr. Firstenall, who was a surveyor, to show me. I wanted him to tell me exactly where the boundary line was, and he did a survey and showed that I had 11 acres of land in Frederick County, and he marked off where the boundary was. Then when I had the builder to build my home, we measured off 105 feet. And I said, don't let any part of that house come any closer than 105 feet in case there's a problem. I want to be in Frederick County. The reason is my wife and I both graduated from James Wood. We were born and raised in Frederick County. Our 3 children born and raised graduated from James Wood, and Frederick County is our home. So that was done in 1972. My home was built. Can you imagine the shock that we had, my wife and I, 48 years later? I get a letter saying my voting location is now in Front Royal Precinct. That was really a shock after 48 years. But anyway, I have since then received another letter saying that my voting has been transferred back to Frederick County. The reason I'm talking here is that I hope there's a unanimous vote here for the approval of the approved agreement. It's the right thing to do, not just for me, but for all the other people, homeowners and neighbors and friends of mine. Kind of a unique road. There's 17 homes on that road. We're pretty close, have pretty close ties. For a lot of stress that's been caused here. I don't think you all realize it for the past 6 to 8 months, and not just for me, but for those folks too, because their ties are with Warren County. My ties are with Frederick. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Robert Saunders, I also live on Foster Hollow Road. The proposed change is going to affect us, what we thought all our property was in Warren County. Now it's going to get split. So my question is, how is this going to affect our polling place, fire and rescue, dispatch, taxes? Do we write 2 checks to each county? We just write one and then they disperse it? I don't know if you're prepared to answer any of that tonight, but I'd sure be curious how that's going to all be handled. Thank you.
We can't answer today, but we can see that the answers are available for you, sir. If you could give the clerk your contact information after the meeting?
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Board. My name is Sammy Campbell, and I've worked and lived in Front Royal all my life. I moved out to what we call the Pine Hills in Warren County back in 1978, 79, when I was just a kid with my parents. My grandparents bought that farm a long time ago, and it's been in Warren County all those years when they had it, and then when my mother had it. I've checked the deeds and everything is deeded right in Warren County. I had a house fire back in, as my brother was talking about with my mother, a house fire. The first company there was Company 10. That meant so much to us because my mother could have lost her life in that fire because they were so close to us. If that's changed, we have to wait for Frederick County to come, and it could take them anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes. There was an accident on my road one night, and one of my trees on the edge of my driveway, a drunk driver hit it, and I had to call the sheriff's department. Warren County sent me to Frederick County. It took them an hour and a half to get there. That man could have died in that wreck. So I hope that you will leave us in Warren County, the ones that want to stay in Warren County, because I work, I live in Warren County, I vote in Warren County, I know all the people in Warren County because I work for Maddox Funeral Home, so know quite a few people. I've been working at the funeral home over 32 years, so I know a lot of folks in Front Royal in Warren County. And I just bid your mercy that you would leave the ones in Warren County that want to stay in Warren County, and those in Frederick County, if they want to stay in Frederick County, that's fine. No disrespect, but Warren County is my home. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Over there about 42 years ago.
If you'll come on forward, we'll be able to hear you better, sir. Thank you very
I
much.
bought property there, and they said I was living in Warren County, and now I found out I'm in Frederick County. And I don't want to vote over here because I don't know none of y'all guys. But if y'all put me over here, I might vote against you. I want to stay where I'm at. And so if you could change it to where we can stay like we are, I'd rather have it, no change. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm just going to take 1 minute. That was my husband, and I met him on the property that he now has that is ours together, but before that, it belonged to my grandfather. And these are all my relatives that have been standing up here tonight. And it's basically for us a sentimental thing. You know, it's been my grandfather would roll over in his grave if he got a letter like we got not too long ago about changing counties. So I just want to thank you for your consideration and pray that you all can make a good decision for everybody.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Good evening, gentlemen and ladies. My name is Chris Gavernick. I live in Foster Hollow Road as well. My property is not affected by this change. However, I've met some folks that are now my new neighbors after living in here, and they're some of the greatest people I could know, just having great neighbors. I've heard that there is some discussion amongst the board. There's some members that are voting for this or that would like to vote for this change. There's some members that have hesitation towards it. I believe you've heard from most of these people here that the proposed change is beneficial to all of them. I don't think there's any single person that is going to be affected by this that is against this change about these property owners. So I do hope that you would vote for the wish of these people. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who would like to speak concerning this proposed boundary line adjustment? Anyone at all? Last call. We'll close the public hearing portion of our discussion. So Peckin?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I would move that we accept the boundary line adjustment as, the new boundary line adjustment as presented, and move this forward for information or a vote from Warren County and see where we go from there.
All right, I've heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. Discussion. Anyone?
Mr. Chairman,
Supervisor Dunn?
for the people, I don't know how this vote's going to turn out, but for the people that are concerned about fire and rescue, I know that the county works with other adjacent counties. So whether this boundary line is adjusted or not, if there's fire and rescue in Frederick County that can help those in Warren County, they're going to cross that line and help. So I think that issue is a non-issue. I'm opposed to this boundary adjustment because this current boundary, the existing boundary that's been surveyed has been here not for 40 years or 50 years, but for a couple hundred years. So Frederick County's had a line. There's been a mistake made, not intentionally, on this area of dispute. To those of you in this audience that think you live in Warren County, people in Frederick County, are nice. I know it's going to be an adjustment, but I'd ask you the question, if 30 years from now, 40 years from now, when we're all dead, those people there, are still going to be on one side of the line or the other, and they're not going to have the same emotional attachments that you do. So because of the historical nature of the line being here for a couple hundred years, I'd recommend that we not do the adjustment. And for those people that live currently in this disputed area, if there's areas that we have to work out with you on fire and rescue or whatever, I'd be glad to do that, schools, et cetera. But I think that the line as surveyed should stay the same. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Trout?
First of all, Blaine, I hope I'm here in 30 years. Anyway, so...
Ms. Trout, I hope you're here in 60 years.
Thank you.
But for whatever time it is until we all pass away, I think we all are going to pass away.
So I think that we need to keep this to change the boundary line to what these people are requesting of us. It is not their fault that there were deeds that were incorrectly identified as Warren County, and they do have ties to the county. I know if somebody sent me a letter and said I wasn't in Frederick County, well, first of all, I wouldn't be able to sit here. Second of all, that would cause me quite a bit of distress. So since it does seem to be positively impacting the majority of people that this adjustment would cause, I would vote in favor of this adjustment.
So we'll go around first. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor McCarthy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look at this primarily as our job as supervisors is to do what's in the best interest of our citizens, to do no harm, and to do the best that we possibly can. So I look at this and I say, what is the financial impact of this for our citizens? And I don't see any net benefit in not allowing the boundary line adjustment. So I don't see that there's a fiscal reason not to do the boundary line adjustment. I see for the folks who are in the room, those Frederick County residents who would like to remain Frederick County residents, I see a benefit to them to remain in Frederick County where their children and they went to school and they have their ties and their roots. As a citizen of Frederick County who has the seventh generation, his children living in the same house in Frederick County, I know how important roots are to where you live. And a artificial line drawn by men 200 years ago, it means something, Blaine. I agree with you, it does. But I think it also means something that people grew up with a certain community and they have roots in that community. Therefore, I will vote in favor of the boundary line adjustment. Thank you.
Further discussion, anyone?
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor
To
Dunn?
both Ms. Trout and Mr. McCarthy, I guess my comment is a mistake was made, not intentional, but it was a mistake. And so we know where the line is. So the question is, why are you then going to go and make a boundary adjustment when you know where the line is? That's my only comment. I mean, I know there's real people here, and I'm empathetic to that, but we've had a line here for 200 years. It was surveyed. It was part of Frederick County. So because of a mistake, why do you then make an adjustment? If there were a further mistake in northern Frederick County, and all of a sudden, Mr. McCarthy, you found yourself in Maryland, you'd have that. But this is just a small area, so I'd just ask you to reconsider. Thank you.
Further discussion, anyone? All right, I'll have to comment. I have great empathy for these folks and their love of the land and their connection to it. I would feel exactly the same way about my land, but I mean, a mistake was made, simple, years ago. The line is what was established when Frederick County was established. And while I have empathy for the concerns, I don't think that someone making an honest mistake years ago is a reason to move it. So, any further discussion? Supervisor McCarthy?
Aye.
Supervisor Slaughter?
Aye.
Supervisor Wells?
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton?
No.
Supervisor Dunn?
Nay.
Supervisor Trout?
Aye.
Chair votes no. The motion carries. The boundary line adjustment is approved as far as Frederick County is concerned. All right, that will bring us to public hearings, conditional use permit 0419. Mr. Klein.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Supervisors. This is a conditional use permit request for a public garage with body repair. The subject property is located at 4564 North Frederick Pike in the Gainsborough Magisterial District. The property is identified with property identification number 30-A-29A, and the property is presently zoned RA, or rural areas. The current land use is residential. There is a single-family detached home on the property, and the proposed use is a public garage with body repair for the intentions of fabricating custom car part race chassis. It's a highly specialized occupation. Directing your attention to the screen, the subject property is identified in blue. It fronts on the northbound side of Route 522 North and is directly across from the new middle school site. Public garages are allowed to use in the RA Rural Area Zoning District through an approved conditional use permit. This application proposes no employees other than those residing on the premise, and customers will drop off and pick up their vehicles. They won't wait around for them. And all the work will be performed within an existing building to the rear of the property. Again, directing your attention to the screen for orientation, Route 522 North makes up the property frontage. The existing single-family home is in the front of the property, and the applicant intends to use an existing garage and shop hidden by the single-family detached home at the rear of the property for their public garage operations. There is an existing driveway, again, that fronts on Route 522, which is essentially a right-in, right-out, only given that it is a divided highway. Should the Board of Supervisors find this use to be appropriate, the Planning Commission recommends the following conditions: that all review agency comments be complied with at all times, that an illustrative sketch plan be submitted to and approved by Frederick County, and that all improvements would be completed prior to the establishment of the use, that all auto repair related activities, including the storage of vehicles awaiting service, occur entirely within an enclosed structure, and that any exterior storage of parts or equipment be screened from view by an opaque fence or screen of at least 6 feet in height. That the hours of operation shall be from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday, and 8 a.m. to noon on Saturdays, and closed Sundays. That any proposed business signage conform to our cottage occupation sign requirements, not to exceed 4 square feet in size and 5 feet in height, and that any expansion or change in this use shall require a new conditional use permit. The Planning Commission recommended approval of this permit at their July 17th meeting, and following a public hearing this evening, staff is seeking a decision from the Board of Supervisors on this conditional use permit. I'm happy to answer any questions you have, and the applicants, the DeHaven family, are here as well. They're not electing to speak, but if you have questions, they're happy to answer them for you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions of Mr. Klein?
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Klein, as far as you know, as part of this application, is there an intent of the applicant to build any additional structures or garages upon the property, or is it simply the use of the existing garages upon the property?
The applicant is not proposing any new construction. They intend to use the existing outbuilding that they have for their operation.
And Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
May I ask a question of the applicant?
Let's finish with Mr. Klein, then we'll do that, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Klein? Anyone? Thank you, Mr. Klein. Mr. DeHaven, would you be willing to answer a question of Supervisor McCarthy? Welcome. Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Haven. Thank you for coming in. Would you find it acceptable if we were to pass a CUP with a slight amendment that said that there would be no new buildings built upon the property, no new garages or other buildings built upon the property? Thank you, sir.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions, anyone of Mr. DeHaven? Thank you very much, sir.
All right, thank you.
All right. This is a public hearing. Would anyone like to comment concerning this proposed conditional use permit? Anyone at all? Anyone? Last call. Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing portion of our discussion. How would the board like to handle this one?
Mr. Chairman?
Supervisor McCarthy.
I'd like to move for the approval of the CUP application with a slight amendment that would require that no additional outbuildings or other permanent structures be erected upon the property.
All right, you've heard the motion.
Second.
I'm sorry?
I'll second.
And second. Mr. Williams, are we okay? Your opinion. Thank you, sir. All right, discussion? Anyone? We're all finished? All right, Supervisor McCarthy.
Aye.
Supervisor Slaughter.
Aye.
Supervisor Wells.
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton.
Aye.
Supervisor Dunn.
Aye.
Supervisor Trout.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. Conditional use permit 0419 is approved. Thank you, folks. Mr. Chairman, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this conditional use permit for you is conditional use permit 0518 for the Waverland Farm. It's for a special event facility located at 1211 Marlborough Road. It's in the Back Creek Magisterial District. The property is currently zoned RA rural areas, and its proposed use again is for a special event facility for wedding and other similar type events. If I can turn your attention to the map on your left, it's outlined on this property, on the property where this proposed special event facility will take place. This is parcels are a 24-acre working farm with a single-family detached resident. The CUP application proposes use of an existing historical barn for special events and a designated outdoor area for temporary tents, use of portable restroom facilities which are screened from view, a designated gravel parking area for guests, and access from Abigail Way and Nittany South Lane. The special events will accommodate up to 180 persons. Sketch plan at the applicant, which is in your package, submitted with this package for this conditional use permit. As discussed, the site will be accessed Marlborough Road via roadways that serve an undeveloped and rural preservation subdivision, which is the Applebank South subdivision. Staff will note that these roadways have not been taken into the state secondary system and are owned by Frederick County, and the owner and / developer of the rural preservation maintains a bond for the roads. And just real quick to go over so we don't get in the weeds, most of the time this board sees that we take roads into the state system for maintenance with all our subdivisions because they are state maintained. And part of that process is the developer or owner has to do a checklist with the Department of Transportation, VDOT. Once that checklist is complete, repairs have been made, comes to this body for maintenance and accepted in the state systems. That has not happened. The VDOT installed its comments, which is in your application package dated June 21 of 2019, provides acceptance of these roads into the system with a closure existing access to the property from Marlborough Road. However, just to put a little caveat on that, this would be contingent on the road being completed and accepted to VDOT standards. The Planning Commission recommended denial of this conditional use permit application at their May 2, 2018 meeting. They expressed concerns over the use of the rural preservation road since they were not in the state system yet, and concerns over the impact the entrance would have the lots on the Applebanks South subdivision. Should the Board of Supervisors find this use to be appropriate, staff would recommend the following conditions be assigned to this conditional use permit. Number one, all review agency comments shall be complied with at all times. Number 2, an illustrative sketch plan in accordance with the requirements of the Frederick County zoning ordinance shall be submitted to and approved by the Frederick County prior to establishment of its use. Number 3, the existing private driveway shall be gated off, and that's onto Marlboro Road, not open to the special event traffic or may not be used for any other temporary overflow parking, and all event-related traffic shall have access to the site via the private ingress easement from Nittany South Way to Abigail Way, excuse me. Number 4, all events will start no later than 10 a.m., and all events-related activities shall conclude by midnight. Number 5, any events may accommodate up to, but not to exceed, 180 persons. Number 6, one monument-style sign with a maximum sign area not to exceed 50 square feet and not exceed 10 feet in height shall be permitted. And number 7, any expansion or modification of this use will require a new conditional use permit. Mr. Chairman, staff is seeking a decision from the Board of Supervisors on this conditional use permit. For the record, Mr. Tim Stowe does not represent this applicant. It's represented by Mr. Thomas Lawson, and he is here in attendance, as is the applicant, and I'll answer any questions that you or any board members may have on this conditional use permit. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions of Mr. Chairman? Anyone? Anyone? Thank you, sir.
Sir.
Lawson, anything you'd like to add?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Supervisors, my name is Ty Lawson, here on behalf of Waveland Farm, LLC. As Mr. Chairman pointed out, this is a conditional use permit, which was actually first filed well over a year ago, heard by the Planning Commission at its May 2nd, 2018 public hearing. The site is Waveland Farm, which property fronts on. It has a driveway. You can see it to the right, which connects to Marlboro Road, and this is just west of Stevens City. This, for the record, the very same site, very same facility, very same road that was granted an outdoor festival permit by this board back in March 28th of 18 for a wedding. Interestingly, with the same conditions, a maximum of 180 persons, and that the event be held at the existing barn on the property. The conditions that have been set forth in the staff report are certainly agreeable to this applicant, and that is events starting no earlier than 10, conclude by midnight. The bulk of the events will actually be 100 or fewer people, again, within the barn. And then there is an opportunity to go to the larger 180 because another tent can be installed on the front after you obtain the proper permits from Frederick County to the front of the barn, which will attach to the barn. And the beauty of this is the venue is an enclosed venue, which we believe keeps noise and other impacts at a minimum. The event venue is screened from the neighbors via a large row of evergreens, which you can barely make out at the bottom of the screen. I'll show you some pictures of those as we go through it rather quickly. And also as a result of the fact that the owners of Waveland Farm actually purchased a lot in the subdivision, in Mr. Rinker's subdivision, for a buffer. And it is Lot 6. It says 3BR, 4.38 acres, and you'll note it matches up very well and provides a buffer for the barn. So, if you will, Waveland Farm in this subdivision is its own neighbor, and that was intentional. This has been before the public for quite a while. As Mr. Chairman pointed out, it was in front of the Planning Commission a little over a year ago, and a great deal of effort was spent in the intervening time to follow what the Planning Commission was talking about, to try to work out an access through the neighbor and to attach to Abigail Way, and then go out Nittany South, and then, of course, come to Marlboro through the existing, what, as Mr. Chairman pointed out, is a county road. That actually was dedicated to the county back in November 17 of 2005. That's when this subdivision was created. going forward, October 16 of 2017, there actually was the recording of a second deed of dedication, which created a 50-foot access which connects the existing driveway shown on the screen to your right to the cul-de-sac of the subdivision. It's quite interesting. It truly is odd in my experience because it was dedicated to Frederick County. The original streets were dedicated to Frederick County, and then this 50-foot access easement was also dedicated to Frederick County, but we submit it more than gives access to these property owners. And in fact, in the dedication, it calls out that it is for the access of the owners of the Waveland Farm properties by tax map number. And then also for the house that you see, it says 104 Winchester Warehousing, and just to the right of the screen, EX dwelling for that property to connect as well. The positive of all this and the effort that was made to satisfy the VDOT comment was that gives the coveted three house connections that are needed to allow for public county roads to be accepted into the state system. And so you do have the updated VDOT comment that says if this CUP is approved and these conditions are abided by, the existing subdivision can come into the state system. It will become a state maintenance issue, and the entrance from that point forward will be via Nittany South Way as opposed to the existing driveway, which is just to the right. And it's not an easement. It is owned by Waveland Farm, and they've had that for 50-some years and have used that as their entrance. Should note that VDOT, and Mr. Chairman properly pointed out, has one requirement, and that is that within the existing subdivision, that a final top coat that has never been applied to the subdivision be applied to allow VDOT to accept these roads into the system. But again, updated comment, we believe it's a very positive, certainly for the owner of this development that has been held for these past 15 years, and arguably for the county as well, because it can get off the county rolls and go into the state system. We do believe, don't want to anticipate too much what the comments will be, but am aware that Mr. Rinker is still not voicing a positive comment in favor of this subdivision and this, in favor of this special events CUP, but we do have several letters from our neighbors, including Helen Reinhardt, Pamela Similars, Colleen Becky, Marga and Eric Reynolds, and Thomas and Barbara Hill. And I do have copies of these letters, and I'll hand them in to the clerk to give to you all. The applicant is certainly prepared to abide by all the conditions of the CUP, that the events occur within the barn or if outside the barn with attached permitted tenting. But we do also recognize what we believe is an objection from our one neighbor, Mr. Rinker, notwithstanding all the positive comments from our other neighbors. And so what we would ask the board to do is approve the conditional use permit, but if you will, give you a choice. We do have an existing road. We own it. It was used as part of the festival permit before without incident, worked well. And so we would ask that we be approved to allow for the special events to proceed under these conditions, and that we proceed in either direction, if you will, using our existing driveway and not going through our neighbor, or going through Abigail Way, Nittany South Way, which are county roads, and coming out, if you will, a little west from our existing entrance. Just very quickly, I'm sure you all have been out there, but this is looking west from our existing driveway. This is the driveway that Waveland Farm has used, again, for 50-plus years. Looking to the east, public hearing sign, looking east towards Stevens City. This is the connection to the cul-de-sac to Abigail that was installed. It's asphalt, as you can see. To the right, the little lighter colored, because it doesn't have the top coat on it yet, is the existing subdivision road. Looking into the background, you can barely make out the roof of the barn, and the lot that you are looking at is the lot owned by the owners of Waveland Farm. Again, the buffer. And then to the far right, you can barely make out it, and I'll show you these. There's a row of evergreen trees, again, to demonstrate that an effort has been made to buffer this use from the adjoining subdivision when those lots are sold. Just a little closer up, and you can see the barn. This is actually in the cul-de-sac. You can see the barn. Again, you're looking at the lot that's owned by the owners of Waveland Farms. And then the evergreens to your right. It's a close-up of them. And this is on the other side. This is on the Waveland side to show you the evergreens that were planted. I believe they're actually on the Waveland Farm property. This is an aerial that again shows you the Lot 6, which is owned by Waveland Farm, the barn with a white roof. And Ms. Lehman, who's here tonight, and will have some brief comments. Her house is to the far left, and the family home is to the right, and then the driveway goes up to the side of the subdivision. That's further away, gives you a better perspective of it. Again, ask for your approval here to answer any questions that you all may have, and Ms. Lehman is here and like to say a few brief comments, and we just ask also whatever comments are made that we be given an opportunity to respond to them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lawson. We have a question, sir, if you would.
Right here.
Yes, sir.
I've been out to the site several times. So the road, the existing road, by right road that goes into their Waveland Farms at the present time, if I understood you correctly, the applicant is willing to use that road as their access and egress for their conditional use permit, and not use the road that comes into Mr. Rinker's property? Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. The access that has been cut, which there's some history to, I won't go into that at this point, but would, when you look at, I call it the dog bone, they're very small. They're not big cul-de-sacs, but would that, if it's approved and we use the straight run, then in order to make sure that we're not using any cars coming down through that road, close off that access at this time?
Well, it's an interesting question about closing off that access because the way it was conveyed.
I understand.
It was dedicated to the county.
If you allow access on the main road, there's not going to be a policeman there saying you can't cut through this way.
Oh, I understand what you're saying.
Cutting through that way. So if I'm approving the use of the long road, then I say we got to have some way of closing that off so that we're not, otherwise you're back to base one and coming through back and forth.
I'll let Ms. Lehman respond to that, but
I don't know the legalities to doing that, but it just seems like that would be the logical thing to do.
It is logical, and what we are proposing, again, anticipating a comment from our neighbor, is you go one way or the other, and if I understand your comment, that if it is approved that we use our existing driveway, then yes, we would close it off so that you don't go both ways. You go one way or the other.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
There's a legal point with respect to that, I think 2017 quote-unquote dedication. It is not. It was never approved by the subdivision administrator, so therefore the dedication was purportedly done by the private parties, but without acceptance by the county, and state law requires, and has for a number of years, several decades, required that in order for a dedication of a road to be effective, it has to have been affirmatively accepted by the county, and in Frederick County, that's by signature by the subdivision administrator. So they can call it a dedication in the deed, but it is not. So the little hatched out segment on that document is private property.
And if I could speak to that, and I agree with Mr. Williams, and we did not draft this deed of dedication, and we did not record this deed of dedication. Our neighbor did. We also did some research on what is it then, and it is, I don't disagree that it's not a dedicated county way because it has not yet been accepted by them, but it is most definitely an access way and a grant in favor of specifically identified properties which we own, and the neighbor, which is on the Apple storage property, was also granted the right to use it. So it is most certainly there. It has been installed, and from a legal perspective, the owners of that property can use it. But to Mr. Wells' point, if the board deems that we should use our existing driveway, we don't have a problem cutting off, if you will, our own right so that those special events patrons do not go through that subdivision.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. McCarthy.
Thank you. Mr. Lawson, so you've mentioned that there are multiple parties that have a right to access that private easement. To Mr. Wells's point, in order to gate that off, we would need not just Waveland Farms agreement to gate that off, we would also need the agreement of the neighbor to gate that off. So I'm not sure that we can accomplish.
I'm not sure who those neighbors are.
Well, perhaps I misunderstood. What I thought Mr. Wells was asking, when these events are held, these patrons would not go through the subdivision, which I understand is, and again, I don't mean to speak for our neighbor, but I believe that is his objection. I have not heard that he has any objection to those property owners that have been granted the right to use that connection,
But I guess my question is one of utility. How do you prevent the folks who would be coming out or into the facility for an event from using that without putting a physical barrier across that right-of-way? And we don't know for sure that we would have a physical barrier there without having the neighbor who also has a right to use that right-of-way's assent to that. Ms. Lehman may assent to that this evening, but we don't have the other neighbor to assent to that. So how do we move forward with that?
It's a good question. My thing is you have a straight road coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And prior to Mr. Rinker's road being put in, that was the road everybody used.
Including that neighbor that Mr. McCarthy's referring to.
That straight road was the road everybody used and still can use.
Correct.
It's paved now. It was gravel at the time.
It is indeed.
It's paved now, so it's a paved road. And all you're doing is, instead of coming straight out, you're taking a left-hand turn, going through the subdivision and coming out 50 feet down the road. I don't know how far. It's not far.
Several hundred feet.
700 feet, okay.
It's close.
So you're coming out, it brings you out on the same road. So it's like, why turn left and go out there? Why not just come straight down the road? If I'm a neighbor, I just come straight down the road.
I don't disagree.
And I think that would solve a lot of problems.
I would agree 100%, and a lot of effort has been put into following the guidance of the Planning Commission and running this through VDOT and so on. And that is why, and I've received some comments from some of you all, that is why we're presenting this as two alternatives, and we're certainly fine with using our road that we have used for 50-some years. And to your point, Mr. McCarthy, that occupant, as Mr. Wells pointed out, he has a way in and out through our road as well. And that is, as I understand Mr. Wells's question or comment, we're not gating that off. I understood his question to be that you would be gating off access into the dog bone. But that individual can continue to go up and down our lane to Marlboro and go to Stevens City or wherever he wants to go.
Perhaps I misheard you, but my understanding from what you said earlier was that not only does Waveland Farm have access into the subdivision, but also the neighbor has access into the subdivision via the undedicated, dedicated.
He was, if you read
So
the...
if that's the case, then he would still have a private right-of-way under my understanding of, limited understanding of the law, and you can't block that off without also getting the assent of that person who has the right to access it, whether, and that's my conundrum, is how do we get to that point? Because I'd like to see this approved, and I think that Mr. Wells' point is a good one. I think a straight shot out is a good thing, but how do you keep 100 people from making a left-hand turn?
You've got to close it off.
Mr. Chairman, if I could offer a suggestion.
We're not going too far or more off base.
You go to events like this at Belle Grove or many places, and they put up temporary signage, cones, barriers, the guests could be directed to go straight out the driveway or straight in, and unless you knew this access existed and that it could get you out to the road, why would you go that way if you were directed otherwise? So I think there's lots of ways we could probably deter people from using that connection without necessarily putting a hard physical barrier in place.
I agree with that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tierney, and
All right,
it is
gentlemen.
very
Gentlemen.
visible. Thank you.
Can we hear from Ms. Lehman?
Absolutely.
And we're going to give Mr. Chairman an opportunity prior. Is that what you wanted?
Yes, please. Quick clarification, Mr. Chairman, if it's all right with you. The reasoning, and again, the updated VDOT comments that you have in your agenda, why this took so long to get here, the straight shot on the driveway that Mr. Wells was asking can go, there's a sight distance there on Marlboro Road. In order that to be used, they would have to clear that. There's a hillside there. I know some of you have been down there to see that. One of the conditions of this conditional use permit, as you've seen, the condition that we had added of using or not using that private driveway to be gated off was because of sight distance prior. It was also brought up at the Planning Commission, which is on page 7 in your agenda package, when it was asked, and the same questions came up at that meeting, is why can't they use it for 50 years? As most of you've known in Frederick County, if they don't have the conditional use permit tonight, it does not get approved. The laymen can use that to go up and down all day long with their neighbors. If the conditional use permit gets approved tonight, there's more use of that road, be it as one event, 2 events, or what have you. And yes, as Mr. Tierney puts out, yeah, you could put signage out there. The reason why it took time to get here was them to work to come through that, either through that subdivision or some other way. So that's, just so we have a clear on that today, if we don't approve, or I should say, if the board does not approve this conditional use permit, they get the right to use that straight line, as Mr. McCarthy and was speaking to. That was the only part of this application that needed to be understood. It was brought up at the Planning Commission, and it did have to do with site distance. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Lehman, anything you'd like to add, we'd be happy to hear.
Gentlemen of the board, I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. This is a very important thing for us. We're trying to preserve our farm, which is 177 years old. I've lived there my entire life. I built my home there. I've raised my children there. And we're just trying to generate another revenue source from the farm, because Cal sure doesn't do it, to provide a legacy for our kids and to share what I think is a very beautiful setting with the residents of Frederick County. We've tried to comply with everything that's been thrown at us. We've been with VDOT. It would be a 20-minute dissertation. We have just done everything in our power to provide a safe entrance. And the neighbor that you spoke of, they have an easement to our existing driveway. We didn't take that away. We added them to that just to give them another option. So that's all. So they would always have opportunity to go in and out, and they still go out sometimes the other way. If it's the board's request that we do put signage and cones and some type of directional assistance to our guests, we have no problem doing that. We really don't have a problem doing anything that's being asked of us to do. We're just having small weddings. We've had proms. It's not a rowdy bunch. I live there. I don't want my barn destroyed by a venue. I just want to have a few events to help preserve our property. I'm happy to address any questions.
Thank you. Questions of Ms. Lehman, anyone? Supervisor Dunn.
Ms. Lehman, if you look at your barn, does your barn face Marlboro Road?
The barn,
Is
yes,
the front of the barn facing Marlboro Road? And so if you have the tent in front of that, you're going to have the barn, then the tent going out to Marlboro Road. Okay, that's one question.
Our lot, though, that we own, all but perhaps 15 feet to the west of the barn is in front of the whole barn. So there's no lot in this subdivision would have direct visible access inside the barn or to the tent.
Second question, the area between the cul-de-sac on the area that's closest to your driveway. So if you put yourself in that cul-de-sac and look at your barn,
You can't. You could see the top of a tent.
I can see the top
because
half,
it's
but
down.
my question is, do you own half the distance, quarter of the distance? That was the question I was going to ask Mr. Lawson. How much of that, from your walking your barn out toward that cul-de-sac, how much do you own? Approximately a half, a quarter, a third?
From the barn all the way to the road itself, the cul-de-sac
to the-
area, we don't own that cul-de-sac. That's Lot 5.
Right?
Which is, it's kind of a postage stamp cut into Lot 6, and it's down the hill. So Lot 6 wraps around Lot 5, borders our entire property from the brick house all the way to the barn, and it goes all the way down to the dog leg. There,
Yeah.
Yeah. The
This
last
is-
slide you had, Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, that, if you see there,
Mr. Lawson, I thought you had your last, I don't think that was your last slide. On your presentation, it was almost like your last slide, which,
Tell me where to stop, huh?
no, keep,
That's the driveway.
yeah.
That's the
It was
access.
It showed the lot numbers.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I had. There's one with lot
Maybe
numbers.
okay, you
And
can,
then this one actually shows you where the barn
okay,
is.
you could take, if you could take that and blow that up. So do you own that L-shaped?
I can point over there.
Okay, that's fine. My question is, just show me the barn and then show me how far do you own toward that cul-de-sac?
I think it's that one.
Okay?
This is Lot 6.
And is that what you own?
This is the Lot 7, that's that little piece that would touch our property. And there's a grove of pine trees that go all the way down.
Okay.
Touch the screen.
You broke it.
She touched the screen.
I'm just kidding, you didn't do it.
Thank you, Mr.
It's
Chairman.
fine.
Ms. Candace will take care of it. Other questions for Ms. Lehman, anyone? Supervisor McCarthy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Lehman, so the proposal has been one of two, either as applied or not using the dog leg, so to speak, but using your current driveway. I believe Mr. Sharon has basically said that if we were to approve it with using of the driveway, that we have a site distance issue with VDOT. Are you prepared to then take the steps necessary in order to improve site distance in order to get VDOT to approve this?
It's not possible.
So then it's really, we're down to basically one option then.
I mean, the cut in that road, it's not monetarily possible.
Okay. So we're really talking about one viable option at this point.
Haven't you had other events out there
Yes.
in the past? Has that been okay?
Yeah, we haven't had one
Is
complaint,
there,
one issue.
I mean, they've already had events there.
I understand that, but VDOT is going to have
I
an issue.
understand. VDOT. But why wouldn't
Site
VDOT,
addition.
why wouldn't they do something at this point if they're having events? No, I know that, but I mean, if you're having events, VDOT says you have to have it fixed to have events, but we're already having events.
Well, they didn't have the permit to have events.
No, we were misunderstood what we could do. We were told that as long as we had events less than 100 people, that we did not need to have a permit. So we did have small events, and we went to the advice of our engineer and some other individuals that told us that we could do this. We didn't do it on purpose. We thought we were within our right. But we haven't had any issues, is my point to that.
There's a lot worse cut-throughs in Frederick County.
Mr. Tierney.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize for the abnormality, but I, for one, am confused. And I'd ask Mr. Chairman, on page 3 of your staff report, I'm reading a VDOT comment, which says we've reviewed the revised Waveland Farm CUP application attached and have no objection to the proposed conditional use permit. So I'm confused.
It's the March 2018 comment.
Mr. Chair, perhaps I can help qualify that. What you'll see in the application is that the applicant is committed to come through the subdivision streets. The application states that they will close off their existing entrance to Marlborough Road. Therefore, VDOT, in their first and second reviews, did not look at that entrance because it was determined to be unsatisfactory from the beginning. Thus, the entrance that was placed in the Applebank subdivision, of course, met all VDOT standards and expectations and was appropriate. Because they were conditioned and their application stated that they would go through the subdivision, VDOT did not have any concerns with their application. Should they come back using their existing street, then there may well be a concern, as we've heard about, with the site distance and grading, et cetera.
So question of clarification, Mr. Chairman. So does that mean that we don't know for sure at this point whether or not VDOT does have an issue with site distance, or do we know that for a fact?
We do that, they have a site distance issue, we know that for a fact. Now, one other clarification on the updated comments that are June 21, 2019. One of the other concerns, and I'm not going to steal Mr. Rinker's thunder, one of the concerns was that entrance that Mr. Lawson was pointing at, would VDOT accept the road, Nittany Way and Abigail Way into the state system should they hook onto it, as we pointed out on that plat that was done. They updated that, and that was the update that we're pointing out, so just to understand that. They had actually, and then I'll be out of your way unless you have questions, we did approve, or this board, I should say, approve the applicant for a temporary festival permit on March 28th, and that was to allow a property to host one event that they had at that time, and they were to apply for the conditional use permit. And they did work through these problems. So just so we have an understanding that Mr. Wells' comment, yes, that was, they had come up in front of you all to get that one permit, and then the issues, as Mr. Lawson and Ms. Lehman are pointing out, the site distance, that was through the evaluation process of the conditional use permit. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Lofton.
No.
No.
Pass this time.
Okay, all right. Anything else, Ms. Lofton?
The only other thing I would like to just say is that we did purchase that lot to give ourselves a buffer because we didn't really want to have a house in front of our barn. But that did provide Mr. Rinker a current comp to his subdivision by buying that lot, and there hasn't been any other purchases there for 14 years. So I don't know that our event, having a few events there, is going to do any harm to his development. So I'll just leave that in passing. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, this is a public hearing. Would anyone like to comment concerning this proposed conditional use permit?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Supervisors. I'm Dudley Rinker, manager of Rinker Properties, LC, 1156 Marlborough Road, Stevens City, Virginia, Back Creek District. We still own 9 of the 11 lots in Applebank South, and 7 of them connect to Waveland Farm. We are opposed to this CUP for an event center. There's so much that's been said this evening that I'd really comment about, and it's not in my notes. If I may comment on some of those things briefly, some background before I get into my rest of my statement. They commented about the buffer trees to buffer against our subdivision. The buffer trees are basically in front of Mrs. Lehman's house. They're not near the barn. They're not going to stop noise or anything else going through our subdivision. They're buffers that they put up to screen their house from the orchard. So they're not even close to the barn and the event. Several years ago, 2 years ago, when they purchased the lot, they also wanted a right-of-way onto Abigail Way for the safety of their family getting in and out of their property, because that driveway is a bad entrance. It is. VDOT has studied that entrance for, I know, over 10 years ago when I met with Jerry Kopp. They'd already studied it many times. They could have spent 40 grand on trying to cut the hill down and not improved the entrance. Being a good neighbor, as we try to be, we gave them the right-of-way for the residential use for the safety of their family off of Abigail Way. Two conditions was that they build the driveway or access onto Abigail Way to VDOT driveway entrance standards. They chose not to do that. They put down a slab of asphalt that will not meet the requirements. The second was that they were to dead end or demolition, remove the end of their present driveway from Marlboro Road. They have not done that. So 2 years, they basically thumbed their nose at us. We've talked to them about it. No, they didn't need to do that because VDOT did not need that entrance to meet the state driveway entrance standards. That's because that road is not in the system. VDOT does not care. Their concern was the entrance off of Marlboro Road, which meets state specs at our cost, our expense. So they feel like they did not need to do that. We tried to be good neighbors, give them the access for the residential use. Nothing had been said about the commercial use. I will go back to my notes and speed along since I've already gotten the red sign. We opposed this CUP for the event center. The Planning Commission heard the CUP in May of 2018. They unanimously recommended its denial. They had two basic concerns: who is responsible for the repair to the road and what the event center would do to the value of our lots. Rinker Property is responsible for the road until it is taken into the VDOT system. At this time, the damage from the potential 160 cars coming in and out of the event center on a weekly schedule, or even more often, because there is no limit. It's 7 days a week. It's going to be open, even though they say it may not be. All that possible damage is my responsibility. It's not the county's responsibility, not VDOT's, and it's not the event center's responsibility. It all falls back onto Rinker Properties, and it's our responsibility. The other issue, what will it do to the value of my lots? Just think of the negative things the residents of Apple Bank South will have to put up with if the event center is approved. Some of the reasons are traffic. With the potential of 160 cars in and out, and it could be daily, I hope not, it changes this from a quiet residential country street to a busy commercial road. Children's safety. Kids will not be able to ride their bikes safely down the street to play with their friends because of the traffic. Noise. When you have 50, 180, or 180 people gathered together talking, they will naturally get louder and louder. And you add a PA system, bands, boom boxes, DJs, and other noise will carry over most of Apple Bank South. We know that because we have a winery below our house, and we can hear the conversations and the music, and sometimes you wonder what the hell they're playing. Car lights. Nittany Way has gently sweeping curves as the cars leave at dusk, and from dusk to midnight, their headlights will shine into every house on the street. Instead of counting sheep to go to sleep, they're going to be counting car lights. And I understand that is a problem at another event center not too far away. Litter. When the residents of Applebank South go for the morning walk or a jog, they're going to have to take a plastic bag with them, not for the dog, but to pick up what people throw out as they're going out to Marlboro Road. I do have 2 builders that have shown interest in the lots on a 3 to 4 year build out, but we're at a stalemate until this is settled. If this passes, we are looking at a substantial percentage decrease in what they are willing to pay, if they are still interested at all in building on the lots. The only thing that has changed since the Planning Commission meeting is having Mr. Lawson come and put a positive spin on the event center, and he's going to do it again in his rebuttal. There isn't anything positive about the CUP for Rinker Properties. The event center will devalue our lots substantially. It will damage our road that I'm responsible for, and my quiet residential street is no longer a quiet residential street. It's a commercial street. Giving them the CUP, you give them a business at our expense. Like I said, to be a good neighbor, I gave them the right-of-way on the Abigail Way for the safety of their family and caregivers, not for the commercial use. The Planning Commission works hard to send you their recommendations. I ask you to endorse their plan, endorse the Planning Commission's recommendation to deny this CPU. Thank you, and I'd be glad to try to answer any questions.
No questions. Thank you, sir.
No questions, okay? Thank you.
This is a public hearing. Would anyone else like to speak concerning this proposed conditional use permit? Conditional use permit, 0518. Anyone? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing portion of our discussion. Mr. Lawson, you asked for an opportunity.
I thank you. I'll be very brief. I started off by saying this is a conditional use permit for an event center. And we've all watched many of these come up, especially in recent times. And usually there's a bunch of folks for and against, and a lot, frankly, against. This is unusual. You've got positive letters from the neighbors that live next door and down the lane and so on that are in favor. We have one objection, and I view that as markedly different from what I've witnessed for some of the others. And really what this has turned into more is about an access issue. I have enjoyed very much speaking with Mr. Rinker, not only about this, but over the years. The interesting part is he dedicated the roads to the county, and then he dedicated, and I agree with Mr. Williams that it's not the most artful way of doing it, but to give an easement, an access easement for the benefit of tax parcels 103, 103A, and 104. And those are our parcels, and the one house that also uses our lane that's on the Apple storage property. So what's before you is, I don't think it's an objectionable event center. The record's clear. And even Mr. Rinker's comments are more future tense. Interestingly, there have been events there, and he's not talking about issues that have occurred before, or bags and things like that in the subdivision, and that's because that hasn't happened. It's an inside facility, and that's what keeps it quiet and so on, and less impactful than perhaps some of these others that we've heard public hearings about. And so what it leaves us with is we do have comments from VDOT. We have an existing lane that's been there for 50-some years. Not that it makes it right, but I'm sure there are numerous entrances, driveways, and so on in our county that VDOT, if you ask their comments, they would prefer that they be relocated or enhanced in some way. But we don't have any reports of any incidents on this road or using this access. And yes, we do have an easement. So it's an unusual application, and what we're asking is for your approval of the event center, and I submit the record's clear. It ought to be approved. It doesn't offend folks in the area, and in fact, folks like it. The only question is, and the choice is yours, is do we use our existing lane as an access, as some of you have talked about, or if we go through the county roads, the roads that have been granted to the county more than 15 years ago, Nittany South and Abigail, and to Mr. Wells' comments, we'll be happy to abide by either way. We would ask for your approval and then your direction as to, if you will, which route we take. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Lofton, Back Creek.
Mr. Chairman, let me just make a motion first and get into discussion. I would move for approval of a conditional use permit, let me get back to it, for Waveland Farms LLC number 05-18 for a special event facility.
Heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
And a second. Discussion. Mr. Lofton.
Mr. Chairman, we've heard quite a bit of information here about this particular CUP, and I will admit it is an unusual conditional use permit request. But to go to some of the statements that I've heard, it's like we hear a lot of times when people want to have a special event center, then the neighbors are quite apprehensive, and for reason. I won't say for good reason, but obviously it's a change. And so any change is not also necessarily always good. But I have yet to, from this particular center, where they've actually held events before, heard any negative comments about the event itself or the traffic or the noise. I think that's indicative of most, if not all, event centers that I am aware of in the county, that there is a lot of apprehension to begin with about what impact that's going to have on the community, but I have yet to hear a great flow of information about negative impacts. I tell you what would have really been nice is if those lots would have already been sold and people would have been there, so we could have heard from the people who actually live along that road. But unfortunately, after 14 years, we don't have the opportunity to get the input from the neighbors who might be on that road. And I think that is unfortunate. As we can see from VDOT's report, the roads and Mr. Rinker's subdivision are built to VDOT standards, which can handle quite a few cars and traffic, even though the top coat is not on there. I would hate to think that Mr. Rinker was sold a bill of goods in roads, because if it won't handle the amount of traffic that event center might put on there, when houses do start to be constructed and they start hauling heavy equipment in there, it's going to be rebuilding roads all over again. But like I say, VDOT has said they're built to standards except for that last layer of asphalt, which is normal to leave off until the houses are fully built out, because there will be some amount of damage. But I have yet to see a road built to VDOT standards that wouldn't withstand daily vehicle traffic from residents. The Layman's have put a lot of time and effort into this. As you have heard, they've actually bought a lot that actually fronts most of their farm. So to try to minimize any impact there might be from the event center, I think that was a very good thing to do. So it appears they've gone out of their way to try to minimize the impact on the Rinker property. And again, I think it's unfortunate, like you say, that after 14 years, we haven't seen the lot sell so that we could have heard from the neighbors who would be directly impacted by this. So I'm thinking there's probably some obstacles beyond what an event center might bring to this area that has kept those lots from selling. And I don't believe the event center is going to be the pivot point that says nobody else is going to build a lot in, or buy a lot and build a house in there. So given all that, like I say, I understand it's change. I understand it's different. But I really do believe that this event center will have minimal impact, if any, on that subdivision, especially the sale of those lots. And so that's why I have moved for approval of this conditional use permit, because I believe it's a little niche that's being filled, and this does the job quite well with a minimum of impact.
Further discussion, anyone? Supervisor McCarthy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to say that I'm very sympathetic to farmers. You know, living on a farm that's been in my family for 180 years, I know how difficult it is. There's hardly anything left of the full-time farmer anymore. Everyone has to have a separate job to keep the farm going. They have to find other ways to keep the farm going. So I'm very sympathetic to the idea that in order to keep our rural areas rural, we need to find ways to generate income in order to maintain those things. But as I've said in prior hearings like this on the question of whether or not to have an event center, having an event center to me doesn't seem to be agricultural. I can have an event center on the top of the Rocky Mountains on a bluff, and I may not be growing anything or producing anything agricultural. So in and of itself, I have a problem with just the idea of having an event center. You know, we have other farm markets and other places within Frederick County that have an agritourism sort of bent to it, where we're bringing the public in to buy something of produce from the community. We're offering produce to the community at the site, and they may have an event center as an adjunct to that. I can understand that aspect of it. But the idea of having just an event center as a way to generate income, to me, I can't square that with having any other type of business that generates income. If I want to have a paint factory in my backyard, you know, that's an analogy that Mr. Dunn uses quite often. I have a paint factory in my backyard, that could generate income for me and could help me pay the bills on my farm, just like an event center does. So for me, this is not about the access so much as it is about the use. I can't get past the idea that this is really agritourism. It's a beautiful farm. I've been there, and I think you have a beautiful home and a beautiful farm. But to me, I've always had a problem with these CUPs. It seems to me it's a way of getting around zoning issues. I think we went a little bit too far in our definitions of what's allowed with the CUP, and if it affects the neighboring property, I'm not in favor of expanding a right or a use beyond what you already have. So I'm all in favor of property rights, but not expanding them to the detriment of the neighbors. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to vote against this one, not because of the access issues or any of those things that we discussed. I just can't get past the fact that this is, you know, an agritourism-related use in that respect. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion, anyone?
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Dunn?
When I looked at this CUP, initially, I'm very empathetic to a farmer that wants to go and derive additional income. That's something that you need to do. I've gone out there and looked at that property, and what we've not heard is the people that would buy homes that are going to be on the road that goes from Marlborough Road down to the area. So they aren't there now. Properties have not been sold. But as the economy recovers, 5 years, 10 years from now, and there are houses there, they will have a voice. I went down to look at the dog bone, the two cul-de-sacs, and looking out from there, if I had a house there, the barn seems to be relatively close. I know that the property owner owns part of it, but if I were buying a house there, I think I'd be hearing noise. Mr. Rinker has indicated that he gave access to the area for family use to help their family out, and I think that's a good comment, but from what he has said, that it was not for commercial use. Mr. Wells has talked about the fact that going straight out that road to Marlborough, going right, you have a clear looking at the left, but coming over the hill, there's a problem. So if you have 180 people that are coming to an event from Stevens City, and they crest that hill, if there's 3 or 4 cars there to go left into the current Lehman property, I think you're going to have an accident. My other concerns were that the application says this is going to be 3 times a month from April through October. That's 6 months. And so if you start to put commercial traffic through a residential area, I think it does change the area of it. I had a conversation with our staff, Mr. Bishop, Mr. Sharon, to see if there's a way that the Layman's could go, instead of going out toward Marlborough Road, veer off to the right, to the top of the hill. But unfortunately, there's some houses there that would seem to prohibit that opportunity. I also had a conversation, what happens if they go to the left, onto the Rinker property, to the bottom of the hill, to the left of the current item, and that did not seem to work out well. So although I'm empathetic to the desire to make money, like Mr. McCarthy said, I'm not seeing this as part of an agritourism item. If it were a nursery, it might be something different. So I'm going to have to vote no on this. I just don't think it fits with what we're trying to do. And a lot of conditional CUPs have been there. The road issue is a significant one. I think if Mr. Rinker is responsible for the road, that has to carry some weight. And his willingness to go and provide easement for a family, for personal use, family use, is different than for commercial use. So I'd encourage board members to vote no.
Further discussion? Supervisor Trout.
Mr. Chairman, just a point of clarification. It seems to me that the proposed use for the events would be April, May, June, September, and October, with 3 weekends per month, so 5 months, and excluding July and August.
That's not what the permit says. That's what the applicant.
That is what the applicant estimated. So,
Suggested that it might be.
okay, I just wanted to, I thought
Just for
Mr. Dunn was clarifying or saying that it was what was listed there. Okay.
No. More? Ms. Trout?
No, sir.
Thank you. Further discussion, anyone? Anyone? Did you have something else, Mr. Dunn?
No, I mean, I think my points have been concern on the road. The hill is there's no way around the existing layman's entrance. They have had that for a number of years, but if you start to have 140, 150 cars coming to an event, I know they had a family wedding there once, and I'm glad there was no accidents. But I think over time, you're just asking for a problem there, traffic-wise, and I'm empathetic to not going through the other area that was given access, because when you build houses there, if you have 180 cars coming through and going out for summer months, I think that would be just difficult to buy property. So I think his comment about devaluing his property is a valid comment.
Anyone else? Are we ready? Supervisor McCarthy?
No.
Supervisor Slaughter?
No.
Supervisor Wells?
No.
Supervisor Lofton?
Yes.
Supervisor Dunn?
Nay.
Supervisor Trout?
Aye.
Chair votes no. Motion fails. Permit is not approved. That'll bring us to Planning Commission business. Request for SWAZA exception, Orchard View Elementary School. Ms. Perkins, welcome. Thank you for your help earlier.
Anytime. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Frederick County Public Schools is requesting a sewer and water service area exception to allow the Orchard View Elementary School, which is located at 4275 Middle Road, to be served by public water. Now, Frederick Water is proposing to extend a new public water line from the Deal Water Treatment Plant to the school. And because it is the policy of Frederick County that if a property outside the adopted sewer water service area wants to hook onto public utilities, they need to have an exception approved by the Board of Supervisors. So if I can direct you to the screen on your left, you have Middle Road, and then the elementary school is located here, outlined in blue. I would note in the past, there have been 5 exceptions initiated since the comprehensive policy plan amendment process was adopted back in 2005. 4 of those were approved by the board at that subject meeting. 1 went through the Comprehensive Plans and Programs Committee, was actually adopted into the SWAZA, while those other ones remain outside the SWAZA. So as this request is for a property that is not contiguous to the existing adopted limits of the sewer water service area. The board, if they chose to, could approve this exception tonight, if felt it was appropriate. So with that, I can answer any questions, and there are representatives from Frederick County Public Schools here.
Questions of Ms. Perkins, anyone? Supervisor McCarthy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Perkins, is it accurate to say that part of this transaction with the school board is that Frederick Water will also be getting access to additional water sources as part of this?
Correct. They are constructing a line to the well on the property, transporting water back and forth.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Ms. Perkins, anyone?
Thank you,
How
sir.
would the board like to handle this one?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that the Board of Supervisors approve the request to extend the water line service outside the limits of the SWAZA for the Orchard View Elementary School.
Heard the motion, is there a second?
Second.
Second.
A second, is there any discussion? Supervisor Trout?
Aye.
Supervisor Dunn?
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton?
Aye.
Supervisor Wells?
Aye.
Supervisor Slaughter?
Aye.
Supervisor McCarthy?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and the motion carries. That will bring us to a similar request. Ms. Perkins?
Again, thank you. This is a sewer water service area exception for the West Oaks Farm Market, which is located at 4305 Middle Road. It is directly adjacent to the Orchard View Elementary School. They are also seeking to access the new line to be constructed to the elementary school. So if I can direct you again to the screen on your left, you have Middle Road, you have the existing farm market, and then directly adjacent to the elementary school. So again, with the previous one, the site is not contiguous to the sewer water service area, so it could be acted on tonight. I would be glad to answer any questions that you may have on this. Thank you.
Questions of Ms. Perkins, anyone? Anyone? Apparently not. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Also Back Creek.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that the Board of Supervisors approve the request for the SWAZA exception to the West Oaks Farm Market.
Heard the motion, is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second, any discussion? Supervisor McCarthy?
Aye.
Supervisor Slaughter?
Aye.
Supervisor Wells?
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton?
Aye.
Supervisor Dunn?
Aye.
Supervisor Trout?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries, the request is granted. Board liaison reports, are there any? No one. Citizen comments.
Chairman.
I'm
Sorry, I was a
sorry.
little
Let me
slow.
back up. Ms. Trout.
The Northern Shenandoah Valley Regional Commission had didn't have a meeting, but we received an email concerning the work that's being done to explore recycling programs for the region. So this is a very long email, so I will forward it to the rest of the board rather than reading it. But there has been there's been some action happening for recycling, and we're planning to revisit it soon. So there has been something working. So just for our constituents to know that we are aware that there's a recycling issue, and we're trying to work towards it as a region.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, this is a portion of our meeting for citizens' comment on any issue whatsoever. Would anyone like to comment? Anyone? Last call? Seeing no one, we'll close the public comment portion. Board of Supervisors comments, are there any?
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Dunn.
Go ahead, Mr. Dunn.
At our last Board of Supervisors meeting, the board voted to change the policy regarding anti-discrimination and anti-harassment. However, after the meeting, I was informed that the policy is inconsistent with Virginia law. Therefore, I moved to rescind the change in the policy and refer the issue to the Human Resources Committee to make it consistent with Virginia law. Thus, I so move.
Thank you.
Second that.
And a second. Motion in order as far as you're concerned, Mr. Tierney? And
If that's the board's desire.
It appears from Robert's rules that a motion to rescind without prior notice does require a two-thirds vote.
well, we'll see. All right, any further discussion? All right, Supervisor McCarthy?
Aye.
Supervisor Slaughter?
Aye.
Supervisor Wells?
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton?
Aye.
Supervisor Dunn?
Aye.
Supervisor Trout?
No.
And chair votes aye, and so that gets us two-thirds. So we will rescind it and send back to HR for continuing work. Any other comments? Anyone?
Yes, sir.
Supervisor Wells.
Parks and Recreation information I'd like to
Please.
pass out, if you wouldn't mind. The Parks and Recreation Commission met yesterday evening, and we discussed several items. Two I thought were very important. First, individual community members and families are continuing to donate their funds for benches at our parks. A contribution for a memorial bench at Rose Hill Park was recently received, adding other benches donated at parks around the county. This is a very good program, and I'm asking, getting the word out to have people participate. We'd love to have you be a donor. The bench donation program information can be received through Parks and Recreation Department and on-site on the internet. Secondly, the Parks and Recreation Golf Tournament's being held Friday the 23rd, and the funds generated in this long-lasting team scramble event are used to reduce fees for our youth sports participants in Special Olympics programs. So food and prizes are a part of it, and we encourage folks to participate in that. And if you need further information, go online or call Parks and Recreation. Thank you very much.
Well done. Thank you, sir. Supervisor Lofton.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, earlier tonight, we recognized Employee of the Month, Ms. Rachel Taylor, working for Social Services. It brought to my mind that as liaison to the Board of Social Services, that sometimes the information we hear in there is not very pleasant. And employees like Rachel Taylor have to deal with some very horrific situations and do it on, unfortunately, too regular a basis. So all our employees, I think, do a great job, but I would like to call out the Department of Social Services employees for the stress and the strain and, like I say, just the horrific events that they have to deal with on a regular basis. And so I want to let them know that we really appreciate what they do, and they're certainly a godsend to a lot of people in Frederick County.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Could not agree more. Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Trout.
For I'd say last March or April, I made a comment at the end of the supervisor meeting that we should have some sort of community input survey on our budget. This board approved that, or went along with that idea and directed staff to move forward with setting something up. Since then, we have actually received an email from staff in which we were supposed to receive responses from other board members that were providing input about what we wanted this survey to look like. As far as I can tell, I think I'm the only one that has responded. My goal for this survey was to receive input from the community in the next couple of months so that we could have an idea of what community priorities are for our budget and moving forward in Frederick County. So ideally, we would have the results of the survey in hand, preferably in September, which would be next month, so that we could use that information when Mr. Tierney is talking with departments to try to begin our next budget for next budget season. So to me, we're a little bit behind the 8 ball on this at this point. So I would like to make a motion to direct staff to create a community input survey that will provide, allow constituents to provide input for us on areas of support for spending and taxation. And then if we can create that survey, then we can figure out how to distribute it.
I've heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
All right. So if folks are interested in this, sure would have been helpful had someone responded to the request that staff sent out twice. Further discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Supervisor Dunn.
I'm going to vote no on this, but I will say, Ms. Trout, that I'd be glad to have a joint town hall meeting with you. So we're going to go through an election cycle. 3 people here are going to be up for election, 3 or 4. In 2 years, we're going to have the same thing. I've held town hall meetings to get that same community input. People that agree with me, disagree with me, a chance to talk outside of a 3-minute conversation. In your email to the board, Ms. Trout, you had said that you were really looking for that community input as opposed to a statistical analysis. And so in a community input, you get to have a 2-way conversation. So if you'd like to have a joint town hall meeting with me, I think we can do that. You bring a different set of constituents that support certain things that you have than I do. I'm willing to listen to people that I differ with, and I think you are too. And so that way you can have a conversation in more depth than just 3-minute items. So I'm going to oppose this, but I'd be glad to go and have a joint town hall meeting with you to give people that want to make comments in depth the opportunity to do so.
Further discussion, anyone?
Mr. Chairman, unless anyone else. So I'm not opposed to a town hall meeting, Blaine. Judy actually recommended, or Supervisor Slaughter, sorry, suggested having a public hearing earlier in the budget process so that we could hear from constituents prior to us having all those work sessions, which I think would accomplish the same goal as a town hall meeting, and we would all be here.
That's fine.
Please direct your comments to the motion.
Oh, sorry. So okay, well, my only statement then is that the survey that I would like to have distributed, or something similar, was used in King and Queen County, which is a part of VACO, which we are also a part of, and it was used very effectively. And I spoke with the supervisors of the VACO conference, and they said how invaluable that information was. So that is where this idea came from, which is why the community input survey was what I was pushing for.
Thank you. Supervisor Lofton.
Mr. Chairman, although I think it might be a commendable effort, it has been my experience in most surveys that you never get enough responses to be statistically significant. And so I think a survey without a statistically significant response would just skew the results that we would see. And I'm not sure about Mrs. Trout, I'm sure she hears, but I hear constantly about people, their tax rates, and what they'd like to see the county do. So it's not scientific, but it certainly gets my attention.
Further discussion, anyone? Supervisor McCarthy?
No.
Supervisor Slaughter?
No.
Supervisor Wells?
Yes.
Supervisor Lofton?
No.
Supervisor Dunn?
Nay.
Supervisor Trout?
Aye.
Chair votes no, motion fails. Vice Chairman Lofton.
Mr. Chairman, I move we adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Thank everyone for their time and attention. We'll stand adjourned.